I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Busy show tonight. It's Mark Dolan in for Mark Steyn. In my big opinion monologue, whilst those going on strike may have a claim for a pay rise, by denying Brits access to rail services over Christmas, their methods are downright cruel and will backfire badly. Reacting to that and all the big stories of the day, the brilliant journalist Patrick O'Flynn. Also, is climate change racist? So says Hollywood millionaire actress Jane Fonda. We'll get reaction from The Spectator's Alex Marshall. Can Donald Trump fix America if he wins in 2024? I'll put that to his former right-hand man Mick Mulvaney live in the studio. Are high energy bills here to stay? We'll speak to statistics guru Jamie Jenkins, who has crunched the numbers so you don't have to. Plus a worrying new paper published in the BMJ suggesting boosters are likely to cause a net clinical harm to young adults. We'll speak to one of the authors of that paper. Do drop me a line throughout the show, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Lots to get through, including that big opinion monologue. I'm not pulling my punches. But first, the headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Thank you very much, Mark. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove has agreed planning permission for a new coal mine in the UK in Cumbria. The plan was recommended by the Independent Planning Inspector. It's the first coal mine in the country for 30 years. The government says the coal will be used for the production of steel and not for power generation. But Shadow Climate Secretary Ed Miliband said this was a terrible decision.
Opening a new coal mine marks the death knell for any claims this government has to climate leadership, and it won't provide the sustainable jobs we need. We should be going full pelt for the clean, green jobs of the future. But Rishi Sunak is so weak, being pushed around by his backbenchers, that he just can't deliver.
The Home Office says military personnel and volunteers are being trained to support services, including border force at airports and ports, as further strikes are announced. The Public and Commercial Services Union says around 1,000 border force workers will walk out over the festive period. Members working at Gatwick, Heathrow, Manchester, Birmingham and Cardiff airports will strike for 8 days from December the 23rd until New Year's Eve in a row over paid jobs and conditions. Minister for Immigration Robert Jenrick says the decision's unjustifiable and will ruin the plans of thousands of families and businesses across the country. The RMT union says a resolution to the ongoing strikes are further away due to what it calls a late intervention by the government. The comments come amid a wave of strikes across a number of public sectors. Ambulance staff will strike in a dispute over pay and conditions. Nurses, teachers and rail workers are due to take action in the coming weeks as well. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has accused Mr Sunak of not doing enough to resolve the industrial action.
This morning, his Transport Secretary said that his flagship legislation on strikes, this is what he said this morning, his Transport Secretary, might want to listen to this, is clearly not going to help with the industrial action we're facing. He should stop grandstanding, stop sitting on his hands, get round the table and resolve these issues.
The government has been reasonable. It's accepted the recommendations of an independent pay body, giving pay rises in many cases higher than the private sector. But if the union leaders to continue to be unreasonable, then it is my duty to take action to protect the lives and livelihoods of the British public. And that's why, Mr Speaker, since I became Prime Minister, I have been working for new, tough laws to protect people from this disruption.
Former Health Secretary Matt Hancock has announced he will not stand again at the next general election. In a letter to the Prime Minister, he said he was proud of his 9 years in government, making reference to the UK having the first COVID vaccine in the world. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Mark Steyn with Mark Dolan.
Good evening. The problem with this whole woke thing is that these illiberal hard-left bullies who are seeking to destroy free speech and peddling toxic ideas like critical race theory and gender ideology claim to wear the cloak of kindness. The fig leaf behind which they hide is being nice. Amazingly, these vicious thugs have managed to monopolise the moral high ground. But be clear that the be kind crowd are anything but. I tweeted this out on Monday and it went viral. I think it touched a nerve. I tweeted the following: woke people aren't very nice, are they? Now, I loved putting this tweet out because it brought the most delicious, ironic responses. In other words, a stream of shocking, personal and threatening abuse from the aforementioned Be Kind community. It started gently with this beauty. Do you really enjoy being a total jerk, or is it just for the money? This wag came back with, we're lovely, Mark, just not towards, and then a horrific swear word. But another tweeter dryly points out the irony of this attack by saying, point proven right there. I love the internet. I guess it's pretty woke to support the RMT and the nurses as they go on strike. It makes you a nice person, even though the economy is shot to pieces after the bonkers experiment of lockdowns, which cost us north of £500 billion. I don't recall any of those backing public sector pay rises criticising lockdowns at the time. Now, I'm sure the rail workers deserve something. The government have offered 8%, which sounds generous, but it's been rejected. How quickly they forget that they were bankrolled during the pandemic when trains didn't run, at a cost to every household of £600. And the nurses deserve something too, but 19% is having a laugh. So in both cases, the cause may be worthy, but the actions far from it. There's nothing woke or kind about the RMT deliberately striking over Christmas. Don't forget, the last 2 Christmases, people haven't been able to properly meet up with their families because of those wretched COVID measures. This is the first chance for people to travel the country, hug Granny and indulge in some much-needed seasonal cheer. Surprising, therefore, that the Be Kind woke crowd aren't condemning the cruel timing of these strikes, which is devastating for families and hard-working Brits desperate for a Christmas break. Not to mention the impact on our already punch-drunk economy. It's the same with the nurses. I admire what they do, day in, day out. Who doesn't? And they've been through hell during the pandemic. But to down tools, for the first time in 106 years, adding to the NHS's traditional winter crisis, made worse, of course, by a self-inflicted waiting list of 7 million, is pretty unkind too. We're told nurses will not man A&E departments, intensive care units and other so-called non-urgent departments on the 10th and 15th of December. I believe that this tone-deaf strike, at the worst possible time of the year, will be very damaging to the reputation of our nurses, especially if patients suffer, which they will, and if patients die, which tragically they will. Not very nice, that, is it? Not very woke. Hashtag be kind. Any fiscal concessions squeezed out of the government by nurses or train drivers after what amounts to blackmail won't be forgotten quickly, especially by Brits who have the temerity to get ill or have an accident on the 10th or 15th of December when hospitals are running a skeleton service. No pun intended. These strikes will stick in the craw of those on low pay in the private sector too, who, unlike those striking, didn't have a secure job, sick pay or a gold-plated pension in the first place. The strikes will hurt ordinary people, they will hurt families, they will hurt the economy, and they will cost lives. No one denies the nurses or the train drivers a fair deal, but what they eventually gain in their pay packet, they risk losing in public support. And that's not very nice either, is it? Reacting to that is the prolific journalist and former MEP, Patrick O'Flynn. Hi, Patrick. Welcome to the show.
Good evening, Mark.
Have I been too hard on those nurses?
It's far be it from me to sound like the House leftist, but on this occasion I think there are some other points to bear in mind. First of all, it's not the trade unions or the public sector workers who've produced inflation of 10%.
Well, you say that. They were cheerleaders for lockdowns, and it was really furlough and other such schemes that have stoked inflation, isn't it?
Well, I seem to remember it, the man who is currently Prime Minister was the main driving force behind those schemes. Now, if you're a working person, you see people who don't work for a living are having 10% increases. The benefits, most benefits are going up 10%. The state pensioners are having 10%. Why wouldn't you want 10%? You've already going to have big tax rises because Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt have frozen tax thresholds for the foreseeable future. If you're in a trade union and you think you're in a strong position, you are going to be tempted to cause inconvenience in order to get more money. And, no one should pretend strikes are a nice thing. It's not a coincidence that the RMT in particular is going on strike at the most inconvenient time for people. That's the whole point of those horrible things called strikes. There's no point in going on strike if you're on the workers' side of things when the service you provide isn't in high demand, right? So whenever you have a strike, it's going to be at the worst possible time for people. And again, if you're these workers, in this inflationary environment, seeing your living standards eroded, you might look and say, well, hang on, Boris Johnson, his living standards haven't been eroded. He, quote, went to fill his loft with hay on the US speaking circuit. You look at Matt Hancock monetising the brand of his own notoriety. You're going to have a go, I think. And whenever you get a high inflation, you do tend to get waves of strikes. And the final point in condemnation of the the clown show Tory government. We found out in the last couple of days that there were proposals to bring in new laws to make it harder to shut down public services, but David Cameron shelved them in return for the trade unions supporting his Remain campaign, and that didn't work out very well either. So I don't think Rishi Sunak and the rest of the government ministers are going to succeed pinning everything on villainous trade unions, still less a Labour Party that hasn't been in power for 12 years.
However, the RMT are deliberately destroying Christmas for thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of Brits who are desperate for a break, and the nurses are downing tools when the NHS is already in trouble. If a crisis emerges from that, which is likely, the public won't forget.
I think, of course, they won't forget, but let's face it, the NHS is in a state of pretty close to collapse as it is. You know, accident and emergency waiting times. You know, the government's announced a target that people should be able to see a GP within 2 weeks. That's the target.
If your father or anyone's dad or sister or brother-in-law has, a coronary thrombosis on the 10th of December or the 15th and doesn't get seen at A&E quickly enough, you won't take kindly to the fact that staff are on strike, which is bound to put pressure on the service.
No, indeed. You will want to blame somebody.
I just wonder whether we love the nurses. It's not digging them out, but I blame the unions who have walked the nurses into this. And there are plenty of nurses who don't want to go on strike.
Yes.
And that sort of Hippocratic oath, first do no harm. I just wonder whether we're looking at quite a damaging precedent for nurses to go on strike at this time.
Well, I think it is damaging, and what tends to happen in these disputes is there's a wave of public sympathising at the very start, and then the second time you look at the polling and it's falling away, and the third time it's rock bottom. And you can see that in the polling about the RMT with, Mick Lynch and one or two others reviving the I'm All Right Jack Ealing comedy, smart, wisecracking working class trade unionist. That was quite charming to some people for a few weeks. It's not so funny anymore. So, but again, look at the basic facts. The RMT is much more militant than the nursing union or the ambulance drivers. Train drivers roughly twice as well paid, but they certainly don't have to be twice as well qualified. So we're presiding over a system that seems to incentivise militancy.
Yeah, it seems so. You mentioned the ambulance drivers. They're threatening to go on strike as well. You'd better hope your Uber driver's got a medical degree.
Yes, or share a house with someone with, their driving licence and a car. I mean, again, if you look at ambulance response times, they're frankly terrifying anyway.
Do the unions risk overplaying their hands? Because at the moment, I think it's clear that this industrial action is damaging to the government. A threatened sequel to the Winter of Discontent, which of course was very much the intellectual property of a Labour government in the 70s. And the Tories now going to have their DNA all over the second incarnation of the Winter of Discontent. Labour will remind them of that. But do the unions risk overplaying their hand and delivering, perhaps early next year, Rishi Sunak with an opportunity to have his Thatcher moment and basically take them on?
Only if he has it in him to be that determined to face them down, to go through, short-term unpopularity and tough it out.
Could it be his Falklands moment next year?
I personally don't see it in him, and I would take you back to an even earlier precedent than the Winter of Discontent. 5 years before that, Edward Heath was Prime Minister and trying to grapple with the National Union of Mine Workers. He couldn't beat them. He called a general election on who governs Britain. The electorate looked at him and thought, well, if you need to ask, it's obviously not you. And I think I see Rishi Sunak more going down that path than the Thatcher one.
Patrick, great to see you in the flesh. Always enjoy your brilliant journalism. Patrick O'Flynn. Coming up, your thoughts next. Also, is climate change caused by racism or even misogyny? I hadn't thought so, but that's what Hollywood legend Jane Fonda seems to think. We'll get into all of that and more with our Down Under correspondent, Alex Marshall. Don't touch that dial.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back to the show. It's Mark Dolan in for Mark Steyn tonight and tomorrow night. Are high energy prices here to stay? And is that the plan by those who lead us? Donald Trump's right-hand man live in the studio tonight. Can Donald save America and help Britain if he gets back into the White House? And a worrying new paper published in the BMA about vaccine safety for young people. We speak to the author. Lots to get through, but first, your feedback, gbviews@gbnews.uk. And my big opinion monologue was all about the strikes, which I consider profoundly immoral, particularly in relation to their timing, both the nurses and the RMT. This from Moonhead, who says, mainly I support aspects from unions as they played a major role in workers' rights in the past. But I'm afraid that this guy, I think he means Mick Lynch, is becoming another Arthur Scargill, stopping his own members earning whilst he sits back on his 150k salary, another poor socialist. Another person messages the programme. I used to trust the unions, but now I realise they are as corrupt as everything else. Union leaders talk the talk, but are generally in it for the money. My views are based on my own experiences. And last but not least, at this stage, let's get our last tweet up if we can. And it's this: fully back the strikes. The government has failed everyone. OK, I'll get to more of your thoughts shortly. Layla, can you jump ahead, please? Because it's time for our next discussion. Yes, folks, let's take a look at this. Amazing news from Hollywood. Jane Fonda thinks that climate change is racist. Take a look. Yes, indeed, folks. A little technical issue there, but we know this woman, famous for wearing a leotard, Jane Fonda. Well, look, she's jumped the shark on this one. Here it is. We got it.
If there were no racism, there'd be no climate crisis. If there was no misogyny, there'd be no climate crisis. It's part of a mindset. It's the mindset that looks at a woman and says, nice.
Oh dear. They're in La La Land. You couldn't be surprised. Let's head to Australia and The Spectator's brilliant columnist, Alex Marshall. Hi, Alex.
Good morning. I could have acted it out for you if you needed me to.
Please, I don't want to see it again. This is typical, though, of woke Hollywood, isn't it?
Oh, look, when I was researching this, I couldn't believe what I was watching, but I figured that she's an actress, right? So she probably didn't call up this whole climate change is caused by racism and misogyny on her own. So this is actually coming out of the United Nations and a lot of so-called serious reports on the issue.
Yes, indeed. I mean, look, the bottom line is that it's an ideology. It's a religion now, isn't it, climate change?
Of course it is, but it's actually become more than a religion. So the plebs, the peasants, Mark, they think it's a religion. They're buying into this idea that if they just be nicer, the climate will fix itself. But all of the bureaucrats and all of the activists have worked out that they can make a lot of money out of this. So by pretending that this whole climate change is about racism and past oppression, well, then they can basically blackmail the West to pay them a fortune in reparations. Now, when you read through all these reports, it's not about saving the climate. It's about how many billions of dollars every year they can siphon out of Western nations and pour into these despot regimes.
Yes. How persuaded, though, are the public by rich celebrities wagging their fingers about climate change? Because I think it's counterproductive.
Oh, look, I used a photograph for my article with her lounging back amongst all of her supporters getting Instagram photos. I mean, she looked like some kind of white savior complex, but there was nobody there to save. But I reckon people would be less convinced if they could actually read what the UN reports say. And I just want to float this new idea they've got going around. They call it global sacrifice zones, also known as racial and ethnic sacrifice zones. That's their new ideology. That's their new way of saying, well, the climate's killing people because you're white. Therefore, these celebrities are saying, well, we have to stop oil. And as I point, I mean, this never does make sense. Don't try and understand it. So as I said with Jane Fonda's thing, if she stops oil, which is her main goal, medicine is 95% dependent on oil. So she'll basically end modern medicine if she gets her wish.
Yes. And what about all the oil in that makeup of hers that makes her look so perennially young?
I love that her outfit, she's talking about poor women in the third world. Well, her outfit's probably worth more than one of those women will make in their entire life. But instead of donating that to the third world, she's there getting selfies for her Facebook and Twitter accounts.
I also wonder, Alex, whether or not chucking the word racist around in relation to everything, including climate change, diminishes the power of the word and therefore is quite racist in itself.
I'm actually a little bit worried that Australia is going to be declared a racial sacrifice zone because we've got a new referendum coming up where racism has been monetised and weaponised in Australia for the purpose of creating a new layer of bureaucracy and enshrining quite literally racial supremacy into our constitution. Now, that kind of thing is playing into this UN reparations deal where they want Australian citizens to no longer have access to their natural resources. So I don't know if you saw, but a cartoonist was literally warned that he's not allowed to draw Ayers Rock or Uluru, as you may know it. This stuff is getting out of control, and that's racism. To say you're white, you can't draw a geological feature that's famous around the world in every advertising campaign is completely mental. And it makes me wonder what version of reality that we're currently living in, because Australia has lost the plot.
Yeah, I'm afraid it's happened to the Western world. Now, Alex, I'm assuming, I know it's 2022, but I assume you still identify as a woman. Let's call you a cis woman. That's the latest fashion. Do you think Jane Fonda's got a point that climate change is because of a misogynist mindset? Is it all our fault, us blokes?
I have to say that as a blonde, and don't forget, technically blondes get a lot more hell than most other women, I've not met nicer people than normal straight white men. They are by far the nicest people in this industry. The really nasty ones, they're the woke ones, especially woke women. They are horrifically sexist. I get told to go back in the kitchen and make dinner for a farmer husband that I don't have. This is the sort of rhetoric that they go on with. And if Jane Fonda wants to fix this problem of misogyny, she should really look at her own kind, her followers, the left. They are the ones that are horrific to women.
Yes, you mentioned woke women. You're missing an extra W. It's woke white women. They're the worst. And it's actually essentially politically correct white people that are behind so much of this race baiting.
Oh, look, we call them the teals because in Australia we have a new political movement funded by renewables billionaires made up of predominantly white, extremely wealthy women from the North Shore suburbs of Sydney. And these are the ones who are leaning really heavily into race politics. They think it's somehow virtuous to divide little kids at school and tell the ones who that they're guilty of past historical racism because of the colour of their skin. This is truly sinister stuff. And I mean, we can laugh about it because we escaped this education system that's now gone off a cliff into nowhere. But the kids that are growing up these days are growing up with a warped sense of their identity, and they're becoming hyper racist because they're told to focus on their race. So we've got bureaucracies internationally making money off it. And then we've got another generation coming up who aren't going to be able to behave normally in society.
Check out Alex Marshall's brilliant articles in The Spectator. Alex, we'll see you in a week's time. Coming up, are high energy prices here to stay? And why are so many people dying at the moment that shouldn't be? And why don't the media care? More vaccine concerns, plus can Donald Trump save America if he wins in 2024? And would it mean good news for Britain? We'll be joined in the studio by his former right-hand man, Mick Mulvaney. Lots to get through. See you shortly.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness, brilliant. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Another quick bit of feedback. This from Anonymous. Fully back to strikes. The government has failed everyone. Well, on that we can agree. Welcome back to the Mark Steyn Show. Mark Dolan in for the boss today and tomorrow. Before the end of the show, can Donald Trump save America if he wins in 2024? And would it be good news for Britain? We'll be joined live in the studio by his former top advisor. But first, here's a chilling thought. Are high energy prices here to stay? Is the cost of heating our homes, offices and filling our cars part of a wider government plan to change how we live? A happy accident, if you like. You might think so, given the fact that former top statistician at the ONS, Jamie Jenkins, points out in his excellent Twitter feed that 75% of the rises in gas happened before the Russian invasion of Ukraine. What's going on? Well, I'm delighted to say that Jamie Jenkins joins me now. Hi, Jamie.
Good evening, Mark. You good?
I'm really well. Great to have you back on the show. So it's an easy narrative to paint that it's Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine which is making heating our homes and offices so expensive. Not so, say the statistics.
No, and part of the narrative obviously is always said that obviously Putin is to blame for all of this kind of gas prices going through the roof. But when you start breaking it down, Mark, what we've become in the UK is become over-reliant now on kind of gas from abroad. If you go back to the kind of the 1980s, just 0.6% of all the electricity in the country came from gas, and now it's up to 40% in 2021. Now, what that means is you've got a double whammy for kind of consumers. You've got to pay to heat your home, and that's using gas, and then the electricity we use, that comes from gas. And consistently now over the last 10 or 20 years, we're importing more and more gas. Now, some of the North Sea producers have been incentivized to reduce the amount of gas they produce. Now, today, we've seen that Biden in the US and Sunak now are doing this deal to import more gas from the US. But it's our reliance on foreign gas is what the problem. So you take 29, this is a kind of a chilling number, this is, Mark. So you take 2019, the UK as a whole, so that's all the households, all the business, all our public services, we spend £40 billion. Now, that's a big number on our energy. In 2022, it's going to go up to £190 billion. That's £150 billion. I'm calling it the great energy robbery. This is literally £150 billion being taken from households, government, basically the taxpayer generally, because the government is supporting a lot of this, going to energy companies mainly abroad. And the chilling thought, Mark, if you look at the recent OBR data, they look at kind of the outlook over the coming years, and gas prices are never going to fall below what we're paying now. So we are baking this in now for a long term in terms of what we've got to pay.
And does this feel like a theme which ties in with last night's show, which is behavioural change and a nudge? We know, don't we, Jamie, that the public were persuaded to give up cigarettes by the million when they got so expensive. Are they trying to do the same with energy?
Well, it looks that way. You had Jeremy Hunt in Parliament recently saying that we need to change our behaviour. We need to cut our energy use by 15%. Now, think of a world in the future where 100% of electricity is coming from renewables. Well, you don't need to reduce anything because it's not causing any problem. So why do we need to reduce our energy kind of use? Especially when he was saying this, sat in Parliament, Mark, wearing a shirt. It must have been warm enough for him to wear a shirt. Now, I coach a local football team. I've been out this evening, absolutely freezing out there. It's, people are going to be turning the heating up. When I left, it was 0 degrees in the car. And the thing is, it's just going to be causing a lot of anguish. I think I would like to say to people is, especially if, we know that people die, we talk about excess deaths, we know that people die from excess deaths during the winter due to the cold. So if people are cold, put the heating on, worry about the money later if you're worried about that. Do not kind of save and put your life at risk. It's important to keep your homes warm this winter.
Quick word on excess deaths. You've done a great public service drawing attention to the shocking number of excess deaths at the moment, higher than during the pandemic. But if it's not COVID, they don't care, do they? How bad are things?
Yeah, well, it is being concerning now. We've had 29 weeks of higher than expected deaths. And obviously we haven't got a lot of time to talk about it tonight, Mark, but a main factor in all of this is the performance of the NHS. So these strikes that are forthcoming, you said in your kind of monologue at the start of the show, I'm adamant that you will see deaths will be caused by ambulance services being kind of cut back, by nurses going on strike. You know, we can put the rights and wrongs about the strike to one side, but it will have an impact. And Sunak, Rishi Sunak today, saying he will leave no stone unturned to tackle the NHS waiting lists. But we're seeing more people dying of heart issues, Mark. That's what's kind of a big factor in all of this. And we've seen a 50% increase in the number of people on waiting lists for heart treatment. You know, we're a first world country, and we are seeing people waiting, 400,000 people over a year waiting on waiting lists. And they're putting targets in now, Mark, to try and get rid of waiting lists for over 18 months and 12 months. They're talking of using the private sector. Now, the ironic thing of all of this, Mark, is it might be better to send some patients abroad to kind of get looked at. And we're a first world country. This is not Great Britain, the way the current health system is.
Jamie Jenkins is a colossal resource. He crunches the numbers so you don't have to. Give him a follow on Twitter at Jamie Stats. Jamie, thanks, and we'll see you in a week's time. A worrying new paper published in the British Medical Journal suggests the COVID-19 booster poses more of a risk to young people than getting the disease itself. The co-author of the paper and medical anthropologist Dr. Kevin Bardosh joins me now. Hi, Doc. How are you doing tonight?
Good. Nice to be with you, Mark.
Thank you very much for joining us. What are the key themes of your paper? Because they don't make for good reading for young people over the age of 19, do they?
Yeah, no, they don't. And so the motivation behind this paper is specific to North American vaccine mandates, right? So this is different than you have across the pond in Europe, and especially in the UK. You haven't had vaccine mandates for COVID. In North America, we started rolling out our COVID vaccine mandates in September 2021, based on faulty arguments that were clear from Israeli and UK data, right? The vaccines don't durably stop transmission. Prior infection is equally protective to vaccines. The age distribution, of course, the idea that the vaccines were going to end the pandemic was unfortunately wishful thinking, right? So North America has followed this sort of path of exceptionalism, where we've kind of blinded ourselves to scientific findings from other countries and indeed our own experts. This involves CDC, FDA, and also the White House, who have continued to advocate for vaccine mandates, or at least make the regulatory environment favorable for that. And so what's happened is you have universities who are mandating booster shots for 18 to 29-year-olds. So if you're 18 to 29 and you've had 2 doses of COVID vaccine and you've had COVID once, maybe twice, right? What's the actual added value of a booster shot, right? And yet, if you don't go ahead and go get that booster, you're disenrolled. You're essentially casted out of the system of higher education that you depend on for your future earnings. So, I mean, it's just a profound lack of, on the one hand, proportionality, so weighing benefits and costs. It's also just continuing this very heavy-handed emergency exceptionalism, where we just essentially follow like a COVIDization of the world. Everything is evaluated through COVID statistics rather than the larger social and political context. And we've also further just degraded trust in our scientific institutions through these policies. So this paper was motivated just to, on the one hand, make an ethical argument. But then when we looked at the actual data that's publicly available, and that's where the risk-benefit study comes from, or component of the paper, we were quite alarmed. I mean, essentially what we did is we took the CDC's number needed to vaccinate, and we adjusted it for Omicron because the only available data is from pre-Delta, right? And we know Omicron is a lot less virulent and deadly. So we adjusted that number, and then we went to the Pfizer booster randomized control trial, and we said how many severe adverse events were reported and how many were determined by blind investigators to be attributable to the vaccine. And that was 3 out of 5,000 people, right? And so we put those numbers together, and we also included estimates on myocarditis, And then we said, okay, so to prevent one COVID hospitalization for 18 to 29-year-olds, right, for this university population, how many people do you need to vaccinate? And it turns out about 30 to 40,000 people. So to prevent one COVID hospitalization. And there's a lot of uncertainty and limitations to what we're dealing with, but this is the publicly available data, right? And then, so how many people are going to have a severe adverse event, which is defined as needing hospitalization at least, right? So you're going to have 18.5 people that are going to have that experience, right? And sure, maybe they're short duration. You go to the hospital for a day or 2 days, whatnot. But the risks and benefits don't even weigh up proportionally if you're taking a more like favorable view of what those severe adverse events are, right? And there's a lot of complexity there. But then when you look at just myocarditis cases, out of that one COVID hospitalization averted, you're going to have between 1.6 to 4 cases of myocarditis for young men, right, 18 to 29 years old. And the narrative that this is mild and it's just self-limiting and it's fine, don't worry about it, that's wishful thinking, right? Like for some people, sure, but we don't know, and it's better to use the precautionary principle, which you over in the UK have done with your vaccine policies. The Nordic countries have also followed that route. And America has unfortunately lost its way, where we continue this sort of very excessive policy response to COVID in some areas, which are predominantly blue states and blue universities versus Republican states and Republican universities. So there's a cultural element to this too.
Well, that's right. Bizarrely, it seems to have become political, doesn't it, Kevin? The clock's against us, but you mentioned the Nordic countries. I think it's Denmark and Norway who aren't even offering booster jabs to young people. Briefly, if you can, in the UK, we don't have mandates, but we still have pressure on young people to get vaccinated. When will this tyranny end, do you think?
Well, in the US, 50% of people get an influenza vaccine every year. So I would imagine that people are going to normalize COVID vaccination in the same way. In terms of tyranny, like mandate pressure and coercion, I think it's stopped for the most part, already. I think that there's a worrying trend that during a future health emergency, this machinery of vaccine passports and mandates and lockdowns will come back. I'm very skeptical of the effectiveness of these strategies. I follow a much more, what I would call traditional public health ethics of voluntary behavior change and guidance rather than using sticks and carrots to manipulate people. But that's because I think that the public is fundamentally intelligent and people are able to make wise life choices. And of course, they need to have some guidance and from others that they trust. But yeah, I think we need to return to that.
Kevin, that's almost word for word what I said last night in my big opinion monologue. A privilege to have you on the show, and congratulations on the publication of that paper. It makes for fascinating and important reading. Coming up, can Donald Trump save America? And would a victory for the orange one be good for Britain? His ex-right-hand man, Mick Mulvaney, who's been at the heart of power with Donald Trump in the Oval Office, joins me next in the studio.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Steyn. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store? You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Welcome back to the show. It's Mark Dolan in for Mark Steyn. Tonight, and tomorrow as well, I should say as well. But look, it's official. Donald Trump has confirmed he will run for the Republican nomination to contest the presidential election in just 2 years' time, running on a promise to save America, having previously made it great again. Can he win the nomination? And if so, can he get back into the White House in 2024? And if so, what would a Trump victory mean for Britain? I'm delighted to welcome a man that knows him better than most, former chief of staff to Donald Trump himself, Mick Mulvaney. Hi, Mick. Good to see you.
Mark, it's good to see you again.
Listen, you've been at the heart of power in Washington in the Trump administration. You work, and you're here in the UK, with Actum Global Consultancy. You know your onions. What's your verdict as to Trump's decision to join the race?
Not surprising. I think he was looking for a way to sort of get back in the middle of things. And he is the prohibitive favorite, I think, in the Republican primary. As we learned last night in Georgia, there was a huge defeat for the Republicans last night in the state of Georgia in a special election for the Senate. Trump has a long way to go to sort of regain the magic nationwide. He can win a Republican primary, which is just Republican voters, but he's going to have to prove that he can win independent voters in general elections again, because he's not doing very well.
Well, that's right. The party faithful may love the guy, but it's a question of, can they choose a candidate, can they find a candidate that the people will get behind? And that's a dilemma for the Tories when they were choosing, a replacement to Boris Johnson, and back in the day when Labour replaced Jeremy Corbyn. I just wonder whether Donald Trump's past his sell-by date. What's your view?
He's getting there. It's starting to wear on people. It really is. He had dinner with a white nationalist last week in Mar-a-Lago. This is the type of thing that people get tired of explaining to their friends. They used to be okay saying, well, I like Donald Trump. I don't like his style, but I like his policies. And that got them a long way in the conversation. But now it's like, why do I have to explain he's having dinner with a white nationalist? Why do I have to explain why he's taken all his documents? Why do I have to explain why his business just was convicted of crimes yesterday in New York court? So people are getting tired of having to explain why they're supporting Donald Trump, and they're starting to look for someone else.
And might that someone else be Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida?
Could be, and Ron has earned that discussion. Ron has been a good governor in a big state. He's the state of Florida. He's a very talented man. He's a Ivy League educated, former lawyer, a military man. He's an all-around good candidate.
And he seems politically brave, given the fact that he was called Ron Death Santis for a while for approaching the pandemic in a similar way to Sweden. But of course, he's been vindicated.
He has been, and he has a way to cut through that, to sort of cut through that that chatter to get down to the issues that people really like. So he has sort of that drain the swamp type of attitude that Trump had as well.
Don't you think that the pandemic was an acid test for people's values, including politicians? Because, Boris Johnson, I mentioned on the show last night, he achieved many great things. He ended the Brexit deadlock. He kept Jeremy Corbyn out of power, out of number 10, which would have been a national security and economic disaster for the country. But he equivocated when it came to the pandemic, and he listened to Sage and he shut the country down, which was a very unconservative thing to do. But that's something that DeSantis did not yield to.
No, and he actually did. He did exactly the right thing, is that he did the math and said, we have enough hospital beds to take care of people. We think that our state will be destroyed if we shut down economically. We can stay open and take care of people. Yes, they had a very high death rate, but if you stop and take a look at it, the reason they had a very high death rate is they have one of the oldest populations in the country. So they were able to see to their folks and keep the economy open, and that's what's earned Ron DeSantis this discussion.
I doubt that Trump could win the next election, but can he be stopped in his run for the primary?
He can be one-on-one. He's going to get 35% of the Republican base. If I run against you and I get 35%, I lose. If I run against you and everybody else in this building and I get 35%, I win. And most of our Republican primaries are winner take all. So you can win with that plurality, even though you never get a majority. So yeah, a lot of it depends on the dynamic. I do think it will be a multi-person race. Mike Pence is probably going to run. Mike Pompeo is probably going to run. Nikki Haley is probably going to run. There's a long list of folks who will run against Donald Trump, which increases the chances of him being the Republican nominee.
And why will they run? I mean, what's in it for Mike Pence?
Because they want to be president.
I mean,
if I told you had a chance, would you take it?
I'd have a go.
That's exactly right. So yeah. I think they this is their time, right? And by the way, DeSantis can afford to wait. He's one of the few who can afford to wait. He's still a very young man. He's just won re-election. He'll be in office in Florida till at least 2026. So he will be relevant 4 years from now when we start talking about the 2028 race. A lot of the other people, Mike Pence, Mike Pompeo, Nikki Haley, won't be.
I would argue that the last few Democrat administrations have been bad news for the special relationship. Barack Obama said that if Brits voted for Brexit, they'd be at the back of the queue for a trade deal, which I think was a very insulting thing to say to the British people. And I can't imagine any British politician dictating to the Americans like that in terms of their policy. So I don't think it's been great. I wonder whether the next president will be a Republican come what may. What's your view?
I think so. I think Donald Trump is the Republican most likely to lose. Because if it's anybody else other than Donald Trump, they'll get to that person, let's say it's Ron DeSantis, will run against the Democrat. Could be Joe Biden, could be anybody at that time, right? So then it's a binary choice between Republican policies and Democrat policies, and the Republicans stand to do fairly well. If Donald Trump is the nominee, it'll be a repeat of 2020 where the election was just a referendum on him.
Yeah.
You like him or you don't. Nobody voted for Joe Biden. They either voted for Donald Trump or against Donald Trump, and I don't see that changing in 2024. He lost in 2020, and I think he would likely lose in 2024 for the same reason.
Does Donald Trump really want another run at the White House, or is this just part of the myth making?
Mark, that is the best question, and very few Americans are asking it. It's a great question. He announced 3 weeks ago that he's running for office again, and he hasn't done a single event since then. So it's a wonderful question. I don't have any insight into it as to whether or not he's really as passionate now as he was in 2016. Yes, he announced he's going to run, but if you don't sink your teeth into it, you have to wonder how committed he is to it. It's a great question, and I don't think anybody knows the answer, including him.
What's your best guess as to what happens in 2024?
The best guess, the smart money, would be that Donald Trump runs as a Republican, wins the Republican nomination, and loses in a general election. There's 15 other permutations on that, but that's the smart money.
Poor old Joe Biden hasn't got much breath left in his body. I mean, can we be serious that he would have another run at this? Would the Democratic Party let him?
Yes, because they think he'd be the best choice against Trump because he's already beaten him one time. Right. But even they know that he's starting to slip. I don't know if you covered it here or not, but Biden had an episode about a month and a half ago where he started asking for a person at a meeting, where's Jackie Walorski?
Yes,
where's
that's right. Where is she at?
And she had died, and he'd actually spoken about that previously. So they know he's got a problem. And it's really hard to be president. It's even harder to be president and run for president. So my guess is they're very quietly, very professionally looking for a replacement.
Yes, we have a weekly item on my show, Mark Dolan Tonight, which is Biden's senior moments. And the material keeps coming.
The hits keep coming. So.
I've got to thank Actum Global Consultancy for bringing you to the UK, because it's been fascinating having you in the studio. I look forward to catching up again soon.
Anytime.
My thanks to Mick Mulvaney. Now listen, lots more to come. Dan Wootton Tonight, live from 9. Hi, Dan. Mark, that was such a fascinating interview. The things that man saw, wow. And really interesting analysis about whether Trump will run as well and what his chances were. Really enjoyed that. But Mark, for me today, I have to be honest with you, I know not everyone agrees, but the biggest story in the world is the Duke and Duchess of Delusion, Harry and Meghan, trying to bring down the British monarchy. And we've actually got a big American figure weighing in on this tonight, the former Republican vice presidential nominee Sarah Palin, as well as royal experts Angela Levin and Katie Nicholl. Plus, I've got a lot to say myself, Mark, as you can imagine.
Unmissable. Cannot wait for Dan Wootton tonight. In just a couple of minutes, don't miss it. Thanks to the team. We're back tomorrow at exactly 8. See you then.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by 2 of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.